Hi guys, how are you doing? It's been a minute. So took a little break, as some of you will know, just to finish up my third year of college, and that is all done, and I am fucking delighted. In no small amount, obviously, because I can get the ball rolling on What's Up Doc again. As always, I am your host, Gemma Delaney, and tonight I am coming from the beautiful sunny southeast of Ireland. The weather's been absolutely smashing, and I've been out doing a bit of painting. So I wish you could see me now. The glamorous life of podcasting. I'm head to toe covered in spattering of magnolia paint. The whole house is magnolia. So yeah, we are back, continuing on with season 2. And like I said, absolutely delighted now that I have college out of the way and I can get a clean run at it. And just get, loads of episodes out to you guys really, really, really regularly. As always, guys, look, we're on all social media. We're on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We're on the old Twitter box as well, at What's Up Doc Podcast. If you are following us on social media, you will be aware that we have been doing an A to Z of true crime documentaries on Netflix. Obviously, with this lockdown going on, and, I'm not a fan of talking about it, to be honest with you. I feel like we're just fucking saturated in the media. You'd be sick of it, sick of listening to it. But just kind of to pass the time, I guess, I have been giving out daily recommendations. Like I said, the A to Z of true crime documentaries on Netflix. And look, I'm loving your reaction, and I really appreciate it. Everybody sharing and mentioning me in their stories when they're watching my recommendations. And look, I'm delighted as well that I'm actually able to give you something that you haven't heard of before as well. I think a lot of us think we've watched everything on Netflix. I have, that's for certain. So I'm glad to be able to give you some recommendations and things that you haven't seen before. But anyway, look, back to the matter at hand. What are we reviewing today? So today we are reviewing Murder to Mercy, the Cyntoia Brown story. So look, if you haven't heard about this, where the fuck have you been? This has been the much anticipated documentary covering the 2006 conviction of Cyntoia Brown. It's directed by Daniel H. Berman. And I guess intended audience, it's hard to know really. I'd probably let my daughter watch this. She's 14, nearly 15. She's a mature 14, nearly 15, I suppose. So maybe realistically it's kind of late teens, early 20s upwards is probably the real demographic for this one. In terms of the purpose of this documentary, it is to tell how a 16-year-old sex trafficked child was sentenced as an adult and got life. So like I said, this is back in 2006. I guess in terms of what the documentary is trying to do or the message it's trying to get across, it's, how much of a factor her childhood played in her becoming sex trafficked, how much of a factor her mum drinking while she was pregnant on her played a factor, how much of a factor, were the mental health issues in her family, and how, much of it played a part to getting Cyntoia to the place we start the documentary in. But look, I'm jumping ahead a bit. I'll go back a bit. I always say, had I known about this, had I heard about it, I had. I have been following this case for a couple of years. So I was more so than most, I think, counting down the fucking days till this was released. I was buzzing for this. So I had heard of it before, and obviously I had prior knowledge of the subject as well. And I think most people had. I don't think I'm jumping the gun by saying that. Obviously, back in 2017, I want to say. Yeah, November, October 2017, we had Rihanna and Kim Kardashian and a heap of celebrities tweeting about it. They shared the story, and that kind of really brought it to the nation's attention, I guess, in America, but also international attention. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think many people outside of America had heard of the case or heard of the story prior to that. But that was certainly my introduction to it. So it was through, you know, celebrities raising awareness about it. So like I said, I've been following this case nearly 3 years, sure, this year, the end of this year. So what did I expect? I expected what we've all come to know and love from Netflix. You know, our super polished, super simply laid out story, simply laid out narrative for us to follow, with all the, you know, slick producing that Netflix is known and loved for. You know, the whole story, all the questions to all the answers I had, everything tied up in a nice little neat bow. That's what I expected. I anticipated, I don't know why, but I anticipated that it would be shot in a style similar to Abducted in Plain Sight. So if you haven't seen that before, go watch it. That's another one. And I'd be a big fan of that style of kind of documentary where the narration is done by the victim retrospectively as an adult, an educated adult, looking back on what happened during their childhood. So that's what I thought it was going to be. And like I said, all, you know, shiny and sparkly, the way Netflix just has lovely reputation of doing. So that's what I anticipated. And I suppose in terms of questions, I wanted to know who she is now and how is she now as an adult, because like if you follow the case like I have, you'll know now that, you know, she was exonerated and that she earned 2 degrees while she was in college, and she's now married, and she's now kind of trying to fight against these laws that, you know, put her in jail in the first place, put a 16-year-old in jail for prostitution, which, as we know, that does not exist. A 16-year-old can't be a prostitute. They're a fucking child. It's sex trafficking. But anyway, I'm jumping the gun as usual. But yeah, I kind of, and as well, like, I suppose another aspect of me wanted to know, did she get any kind of settlement? That sounds really like, just really, you know, fucking skin deep or whatever. But I just, you know, she was fucking jailed at 16. After being abused her whole life and then like solicited for sex by this 43-year-old grown-ass man. Like, you know, I wanted kind of the nitty-gritty like that. Like, is she happy now? And all those kind of questions that you have when you follow the case for as long as I have. So look, in summary, I suppose, what is it about? Like I said, when she was 16, Cyntoia shot and killed a man who had solicited her for sex. Like I said, this was back in 2006, and incredibly and fucking ridiculously, she was tried as an adult. And not only that, she was charged with first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life. And she was not eligible for parole until she had served 51 years. Now do the math, like. She's 16, has to serve a minimum of 51 years before she's even eligible for parole. Like, in what fucking alternate reality, alternate universe did somebody rule on that, like? And that's not that long ago, like 2006, do you know what I mean? That's not that long ago. That I think just shocked people from the get-go. Anybody, when they did hear about this story, that was the main thing, was like, what the actual fuck? You shitting me? This all happened in Nashville, Tennessee. That's neither here nor there. I'm not saying that's a factor. I'm just stating the facts, answering the questions about the documentary. And basically this documentary then follows little Cyntoia through her trial, throughout the guilty verdict, through, like I said, the 2 degrees that she earns in prison, and finally getting out. And then, you know, it has like interviews with her lawyers, her counsel. It has her adoptive mum, her birth mother, and her birth grandmother as well. So there's great little interviews and great insights in this documentary. Which is, you know, it's lovely to have those. It's lovely to have those other people to lean on for information, that it's not just coming from one source. So you get a real feel for the background that she came from. And I suppose the fact that she probably never stood a fucking chance, really, you know, coming from the background that she did. But I'll move on to that next. So I suppose, in terms of, like, you know, the documentary itself, I found the best bits of this documentary were probably what I just mentioned there, the interviews with, like, the birth mother, the birth grandmother. It was interesting to discover that they had both been teenage mothers, that they'd both come from, you know, very poor, poverty ridden backgrounds, that actually all of the family, every member in the family suffers from mental illness and mental health issues to some degree, some more than others. And you can, like, God forgive me, but you can actually you can see it in the grandmother. Like, the grandmother is, like, you know, we would say she's for the birds. That's the Irish saying, she's for the birds. Yeah, or a creator. She's a bit of a creator, like, God love her. Yeah, she's there's a want in her. But and the ma is not a whole lot better. Like, you know, when we're first introduced to her, again, I hate to make snap judgments, but again, if you watch it, you'll see what I mean. She starts off the documentary, when we're first introduced to her, she's got grills and cornrows, and, you know, she's just not very, you know, well kept or well groomed or anything like that. But as I said, it you know, it kind of, it paints that picture, that background she's come from, that poverty-stricken background. But they were probably my favorite bits of the documentary, actually, was the interactions with the birth mother and the grandmother. It gave a real insight. There is this lovely part in the documentary when the grandmother says that she wishes her own mum had had a hysterectomy at 16 instead of giving birth to her, so that she could have stopped the chain of mental illness. And I just thought that was really, you know, it's actually really tragic but really profound as well. That, you know, like I said, she is for the birds, mad and all as she is, you know, fucking mad as a hatter. She has the awareness and the self-awareness to know that the only way to stop this is to stop the chain, to stop the genetics, you know. That's a hereditary thing, and it's gonna keep going on, and there's gonna have this, you know, knock-on effect generation after generation after generation, unless they're just, like I said, given elective hysterectomies. But yeah, that was interesting. And like I said, as well, the history of poverty, but also that the history of drug abuse, drink abuse, prostitution, child abuse, rape. Yeah, so that was a really interesting aspect of the documentary, and a real eye opener there, and probably an insight you don't get every day. You know, you don't get to go back 3 generations and see how this is like history repeating itself, and repeating itself. Another thing that I didn't expect with the documentary, and just literally from the opening scene blew my fucking mind, is how young she looked. Because obviously, when I became aware of this court case, she was already in jail at that stage for what, 11 years. Do you know what I mean? So she was 11 years older. So what, she was in her late 20s. I don't think I had ever seen a picture or footage of her from when she was actually convicted. Like, she's 16. She looks about 11, 12. That's no joke. She looks so young. So young. She's sitting there in her orange, you know, jail jumpsuit, and her hair in 2 fucking pigtails, and, like, you know, virgin hair, and an eyebrow that's never been tweezed. And it's like, do you know what I'm saying? Not a wrap of makeup on her, like, just a real babby head on her. And I wasn't expecting that. And that sucker punches you, probably from the like I said, the first scene or the opening scenes of it. You just can't get over that, like, this child sat in front of a jury and they convicted her. They convicted her, they made her guilty. And not just that, but a first-degree murder, and then sentenced her to life. They tried her as an adult. Like, yeah, it's, watch it, you'll see what I mean. It's quite disturbing in that regard. I've talked about the positives. and I want to keep it positive. I wanted to fucking love this documentary. As I said, I've been following the case. I'm, mad fucking feminist. I'm mad, women's rights, all that jazz. And so I wanted to love this documentary, and I didn't. And I knew within the first couple of minutes I wasn't really getting into it. I wasn't really enjoying it. But I was determined to finish it, and I knew I was going to do a podcast about it. So when I do a podcast about it, as I told you before, I don't watch it once, I watch it twice. I watch it the first time, just completely not for any other reason than to watch it and enjoy it. And then the second time I rewatch it and I take my notes for the podcast and I make my little musings and my observations. So yeah, I watched it the first time and I was like, why isn't this working? Why don't I like it? And then it ended. And when it ended, because it's quite a short documentary, and now off the top of my head, I can't tell you. I think it's like an hour and a half, hour 26. It's not particularly long. So, it's not that Netflix dragged out to death format that we're used to, where we're going on for 9 fucking episodes and it should have ended 2 episodes ago. Like it's very quick. But it felt like it dragged on. And like I said, it wasn't until it ended that I sat down and kind of go, why didn't that work? That I figured out why it didn't work, in my opinion. And it's always my opinion, guys. Look, I'm no expert, as I said. I'm a college student. I don't fucking know it all. But in my opinion, the reason that this didn't work, why I couldn't put my finger on it while watching the documentary, why it didn't do it for me initially, the first thing I would say is the god-awful cheesy graphics and segues between each segment. Diabolical, just awful. The second thing is the god-awful camera work. It's terrible. It's very jarring, because you're aware, it's, it doesn't feel natural. It feels like it's someone trying to be arty in film. But I have to stress that this was shot in real time. So this was shot as the case was taking place in 2006. Obviously, we are used to a much more shiny, much more polished format now. And anything that doesn't kind of fit into that is going to be jarring to a viewer. So look, like I said, this is, 2006 and we're now in 2020. So it's a long time ago. It's 14 years ago. It's a decade and a half nearly, and we're not used to that kind of style of documentary making anymore. But the other reason it didn't work, I felt, was that it felt like it was 2 different documentaries. So we have the following of her through the case and then her incarceration, and then it kind of ends, and then it's suddenly the present day and it talks about, celebrities bringing awareness to the case, and suddenly, she's back in front of the appeals people, and the next minute she's out, and like it's very abrupt. It ends very abruptly. So I gave it an old Google, and what did I discover? Only lo and behold, this was a documentary. This is a PBS documentary. It was released in 2011, and then they just threw an extra 15-20 minutes on the fucking end of it, reworked it and stuck it on Netflix. So no wonder it doesn't work, because they literally did the bare minimum to jazz it up a bit for 2020, when it's a little bit more relevant now, because obviously she's out. Spoiler alert, she got released. But you know what I mean? So it just felt really fucking lazy for Netflix, to be honest with you. Like, they could have done such a better job. And then, while I was doing me Google to try and figure out, what was up with this, I found out something else. And I realised why the fucking documentary didn't work, in my opinion, was that the whole thing was completely unauthorised by Cyntoia. And what I mean by that is that, obviously, like I said, there's footage of her when she's a 16-year-old at the beginning. That was obviously with her authorisation. As much authorisation as a 16-year-old child can give, whatever. But that was, it wasn't hidden camera. She was aware there was a camera crew up in her face. But it then, obviously, with her release and all that, they then wanted to rehash it, and she didn't authorise it. And I just thought to myself, how absolutely shitty of the director and Netflix, because like this is a girl who has been used and abused her whole life, and then her story isn't even her own. You know, they just go ahead and go, well, fuck you. If you're not going to come on board, we're just going to do it anyway. Like, so lousy of them. Like, you know, I don't want to be dramatic and like, oh, she's been raped and you're raping her again and all this shit. But do you know what I mean? It does seem like this girl has been through enough. She has been used and abused her entire life. And you haven't even the decency to get her say so in the retelling of her life. Like, that just seemed really shitty to me. But that's really what this documentary was missing. And for that reason, I just don't feel it works at all. I really wanted to love it. I wanted to love it, because I have been following this story for many a year now, but it just didn't work in my opinion. And look, I nodded on it kind of earlier in the podcast there as well. Again, in my opinion, I am no expert. What this story needed was a narrative like Abducted in Plain Sight. We needed, like Abducted in Plain Sight, you know, we have the adult Jan looking back retrospectively on her life, telling the story, and then, you know, the pictures are being painted through the archive footage, through the old photographs, through maybe some modern day footage of the cameraman, you know, driving down the street she used to live in. Do you know what I mean? It needed more of that knitting together, because the way this was edited together, it was like 1 minute we're in 2006, camera work shit, graphics shit, you know. And another thing as well, like, and shoot me, but like Cyntoia naturally at 16 in 2006, she doesn't come across as being that likable. Like, she's a stroppy child. Do you know what I mean? So there's a big jump then in her personality as well. Like, 1 minute she's this like little shithead in 2006 getting arrested, and then there's a jump and she's kind of, you know, we've jumped forward like 10 years and she's in her late 20s and she's after getting 2 degrees, still behind bars, but, you know, fighting through the appeals process, and then she's out. And then it's ended. Like, you know, it needed that, you know, her sat on a chair in her house, you know, loads of actuality in the background, loads of pictures of, you know, whatever, her family, present day, and then her telling the story, going back, you know, and painting the picture for you. It just needed that, and it didn't have it. And in my opinion, for that reason, the documentary really, really, really didn't work. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of research on the who's and the whats and the whys, but I'm assuming there mustn't have been a reason that Netflix could get her authorization, whether there was a falling out or there was a conflict of, you know, artistic ideas or whatever. I am assuming that their first idea would be to contact her. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they never did that. But that just seems like a really juvenile mistake to make. And like, Netflix are not juveniles in this. They've been doing it and they have it down to a fine art now. Like, documentary making is their thing. So I'm assuming something else happened, or that they couldn't get her on board for whatever reason. Maybe she didn't want the archive footage used. But even like, again, you would think that Netflix would have the foresight to go, right, we'll sit down and we'll talk through what you're okay with us using and not using. And I don't think the story would have been any worse off for less archive footage. You know, maybe she didn't want some of the more unflattering footage shown or whatever. I don't know. Like, obviously I'm totally shooting in the dark here. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out why they didn't get her on board, because this could have been the new Making a Murderer. This could have been the new super documentary. Like, obviously, look, don't get me wrong, we Tiger King there a couple of weeks ago and laughs and all that shit, but I mean, like, a super serious issue. You know, we've had the Me Too movement, we've had the Time's Up movement, and this could have been really timely, and instead it's just a really shitty package thrown together. And there's loads of questions that went unanswered as well, and again, it all just seems a little bit sloppy. Like, it really does. There were so many questions that I just felt like weren't answered in the documentary at all. I wanted to know, you know, where was the divide? When did it happen that she was pulled from this loving adoptive family, and then suddenly, you know, she's out you know, after being trafficked as a child sex worker. Like, it didn't give a clear explanation of how that happened. And I know everything's not cut and dry, but you know what I mean? Like, it just went very quickly. She seemed to have a great relationship with her adopted mother, and then suddenly she's with this fella who's 24 years old. She's 16. He's her pimp. I'm making inverted commas sign because obviously he's not a fucking pimp. She's a child. She was sex trafficked, but yeah, he calls himself her pimp, and she calls him her pimp as well. Yeah, so that needed clarity. I needed to know more how that came to be. I wanted to know more about the man she shot, Johnny Allen, as well. Now, I know the legality of that would be fucking messy. Like, it would be very hard to speak about him without maybe being liable and that kind of thing. But again, I think he could do it without being liable. Like, I just needed to know more about him and more about his person and who he was. There needed a bit of clarity there, you know, other than obviously there was her telling of the story of him soliciting her for sex, bringing back to the house. He was kind of, you know, being creepy and showing her guns and stuff, and she thought he was going to maybe try and kill her, and that she went first. Whether I believe that or not, that's not really up to me to say. She's been, like I said, she's been released. So that's not up to me to. I'm not the judge and jury. I'm just reviewing the reviewing the documentaries. But yeah, I would like to have known more about that. I would also have liked to known. I'd like to know. Just, you know, loads of stuff. How is she doing today? Is she all right? Is she working as some kind of advocate now? There's been nods to that she did a lot of that kind of thing while in jail. That's what her degrees were, and that she wrote papers and stuff about it. Yeah, I wanted that. I wanted that clarity, and I wanted that, you know, that you're used to getting with Netflix now, that everything is, it's all resolved and she's all happy now, and the end. It just ended too abruptly for me with too many unanswered goddamn questions. I need answers. But look, would I recommend it? Like, for all me giving out, I know I've given out for like half the podcast now. I would absolutely recommend you watch this. Like, do. Don't let my opinion put you off. I think if you listen to this podcast first and watch it second, you will understand where I'm coming from. You will get me. If you don't, if you watch it first and then listen to this podcast, I still think you'll agree when you watch it yourself the first time without ever hearing my opinion on the matter, that there's something wrong. And you might not even know why. Like I said, I couldn't really put my finger on it until I actually started sitting down and dissecting it as I do to do the podcast. And I was like, why aren't I liking this? Why? This is my jam. Like, I like human rights. I like women's rights. I like, you know, and yeah, it just, there was too many things that just pulled you out of the story. There wasn't a nice flow of narrative as we are used now. We're used to being spoon fed. It's 2020. We want to be told how to feel, you know. But yeah, I would still recommend you go watch it. It's just, if for no other reason than, I think anyway, and look, I might be alone here, but I think it's really hard to remember a time before the Me Too movement and before the Time's Up movement, and how utterly fucking shocking it is to see, like I said already, this babby, this 16-year-old girl who looks like 11, sitting in this jumpsuit with the pigtails in her hair, and, you know, talking about performing sex acts, and then you're like, the fact that she gets A, tried as an adult, B, convicted, C, sentenced to life, and then like D, isn't eligible for parole for 51 years, and she's 16, like a young 16 at this point in time. So it's good from even that perspective, just to go, Jesus Christ, there was a time we didn't think sex trafficked children were sex trafficked children. We called them child prostitutes. Like, that's mad. Like, they had a say. Do you know what I mean? Like, if like a child can't decide to be a sex worker, you know? But yeah, I think sometimes it is hard to remember a time before these movements and remember the world we had. Not that I'm saying there's not things that still need to be changed and still need to be improved on, but you know what I mean? It seems like a lifetime ago, and it's crazy to believe that like a jury, I should say, with women convicted a little girl. But look, yeah, so look, go and watch it. Don't let me put you off it. But just be aware that there are some glaring things that, yeah, are just not right about this documentary. Shitty that they released it, shitty that it was unauthorized, and shitty that she didn't partake in it. It needed that. But happy news, she is actually releasing her own. So she is in the process of now filming her own documentary, where she will tell her story. And I guess that's what I thought this was going to be. I don't know if I would have watched it if I'd known it wasn't authorized. I had already watched it, obviously, and then did the Google and discovered that it wasn't. But I'd still say go and watch it and see what you make of it. I've had several friends watch it and they have liked it, and it wasn't until I start giving out about it that they kind of, oh yeah. So don't let me colour your opinion on it at all. That is Murder to Mercy, the Cyntoia Brown story. So guys, like I said, we are back, we are swinging. I don't have any reasons hold me back or stop me now, so we're going to go full gung-ho into season 2, and I am delighted to be back and to be able to show you what we have coming up in season 2 as well. So guys, that is it for tonight. As always, I have been your host, Gemma Delaney. We are at What's Up Doc Podcast, the documentary review podcast. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. And if you're feeling real sound and you're an Apple user, go on to Apple, give us a rating and give us a review. That is what makes us chart. And we need to chart. Yay. Don't know why I'm singing. Anyway, guys, look, as always, it has been a pleasure. Good night, good luck, God bless. Take care, guys.
The motto for 2022 is out with the old, in with the bold. And if you're ready to revamp your career, your relationships, or your money this year, check out Modern Life. It's a new podcast and newsletter from Fidelity Investments with fresh perspectives from people defining success on their own terms and tips to help you do the same. Search Modern Life wherever you find your podcast to follow and subscribe. Keep in mind that investing involves risk. The value of your investment will fluctuate over time, and you may gain or lose money. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC, 900 Salem Street, Smithfield, Rhode Island, 02917.